Welcome back to the Adventures of the Monad, which will look at life, the universe, and everything. My name is Kazim Kamal-ur-Rahim. In this series, I ask the question, where do we come from, who are we, and where are we going? I post one presentation a week. Please subscribe to my website and hit the bell icon for notifications of future videos. You can also leave comments and join in forum discussions on my website. In my previous two presentations, I outline the 6 stages of consciousness a monad passes through as it traverses the lowest, the 7th kingdom. This kingdom is also referred to as our solar system. This is our home, and this is where we have causalized, becoming human beings. We started life as primary matter, the famous one atom, otherwise known as the monad. This happened when the third logos brought about what is known in esoterics as the first outpouring. We have passed through all the cosmic planes 3 times, and at the second outpouring, we acquired passive and then active consciousness. This was a gift from the second logos. We finally reached self-consciousness when our monad evolved to the quaternary level. This happened when the first logos delivered the third outpouring. We then proceeded to migrate our consciousness with a lot of help from the Devic kingdom. We passed through the 3 lower kingdoms of nature until we finally reached the 4th, the human kingdom. I now wish to continue our exploration of consciousness as it pertains to us, humans. Let's start off by looking at unconsciousness. I start by first dealing with what it is to be unconscious. I'm not referring here to primary matter, the first atom, which is potentially conscious. I'm referring to the monad, the self, as it is now, functioning in the human kingdom. The monad is always conscious during incarnation, but not always present in the physical body. When it is not present, the body is said to be unconscious. This could just be considered a simple definition, and we can carry on. But I wish you to think about this state and what it implies. What is going on when you are unconscious? I have said the monad is not present. How is the monad present in the first place if it cannot enter the solar system? It has to focus itself through a triadic structure, which I have described in detail. So, the presence of the monad is really referring to the focus of consciousness. We have discussed that the monad, for most incarnate humans today, focuses its consciousness into the permanent emotional atom. What then is going on when the physical brain itself loses consciousness? What it means to be awake is what is going to be discussed through the rest of this presentation. Metaconsciousness is the totality of the monad's consciousness and is not separate from the waking consciousness. It is an expression of that consciousness. Waking consciousness is a restricted aspect of metaconsciousness. Our metaconsciousness works in the background and can provide solutions to the waking consciousness. So what exactly is metaconsciousness? Firstly, it includes most of what is termed the subconscious. This is the active consciousness of the first triad and its subtle bodies. Secondly, metaconsciousness is composed of superconsciousness. This, in our case, is primarily our causal consciousness. However, superconsciousness technically refers to all consciousness above where we are objectively conscious. Monads make full use of their subtle bodies. However, not all of the consciousness that we think makes up our thought patterns are our own. Remember, these subtle bodies have an inherent consciousness of their own. They are stuffed full of developing monads. We know them as elementary essence or secondary matter. Your envelopes of incarnation are beings. This is a collection of three bodies: the physical etheric, the emotional, and the lower mental, surrounded by a persona that constitutes an incarnate human being. Although other life forms are dwelling within our subtle bodies, our meta-consciousness is only interested in the conscious activity that is initiated or perceived by the monad itself. The human monad is not interested in the limited consciousness of the secondary matter that constitutes elementary essence. For the monad, providing a home for this secondary matter to evolve is a win-win situation. The monad is able to function on the cosmic physical plane and evolve by developing its consciousness further. The elemental essences are acted upon by our much more powerful conscious energies. In this way, they evolve as well. So the meta-consciousness has three components, as can be seen in the diagram. We start in this presentation by focusing on the middle component, the waking consciousness. Our waking consciousness is only a small part of our meta-consciousness, as I've mentioned before. This goes a long way to explaining why we have such a big brain and seem to use so little of it. It would seem that the brain is designed to hold a lot more consciousness than we have access to at the moment. Our waking consciousness is active in the physical etheric brain. When we go to sleep, we fall unconscious. The reason this happens is that the focus of the monad in one of the triad atoms or the permanent mental molecule shifts. It withdraws its focus into the emotional body and in some cases into the mental body. It is not only the focus of the monad that shifts. The emotional, mental, and lower causal bodies leave the physical etheric body as well. Elvis has left the building. So, to recap, only a small percentage of a monad's consciousness reaches the physical brain. The rest is metaconsciousness. This includes a portion of the sub- and superconsciousness. The reason for this is as follows. Our subtle bodies are much larger structures than our brain. Just to visualize it, when I draw a representation of our subtle bodies, they encompass our entire physical form. Our brain, such as we are, comprises a small proportion of our entire physical body. For this reason, a large portion of the activity of the subtle body does not reach or can be contained within the brain. Most conscious activity is too subtle to be detected by the physical brain, anchored in matter as it is. Our brain processes information in series, one event after another. In this manner, most events that are witnessed are not recorded, at least not consciously, as they are occurring in parallel. When we are awake, the chatter we experience in our brains drowns out any higher thoughts we may be having. This is why meditation is so important if you wish to connect with more of your meta-consciousness. Now let's talk about the Etheric Web. I have not spoken about this in detail yet, but around every incarnate human there is an Etheric Web, which acts as a protective shield. This stops the conscious brain receiving messages from the emotional, mental, and causal subtle bodies. Now you may well say, why should this be a good thing? Surely we want to be in contact with our higher subtle bodies. While the general answer to this question may be yes, the specific answer is no. If you have objective consciousness on the emotional plane, then you would not only be aware of the contents of your emotional body, but also the whole emotional plane as well. Vision into this plane would be disorientating as it operates in 4 dimensions, and we are not used to that. This plane of consciousness also manifests your thoughts and desires, so you would immediately land yourself in a world of illusions. Our desire world would manifest before our eyes. It might be amusing for a while, but this is not exactly evolving our consciousness any further. There is also the unpleasant fact that our thoughts are not always full of love and light. What happens when a negative thought emerges? Those unsavory thoughts would now become a living nightmare that would engulf you. Not a pleasant thought at all. Last but not least, other discarnate entities on this plane. If you think you have problems with your social media contacts expanding, imagine what would happen here. The emotional plane is also the home for a group of discarnate entities known as the Black Lodge. They are the ones that work very hard to lead us into temptation. They also feed off our fears and anxieties and help to exacerbate them for their own advantage. I may return to this topic in greater detail in the future. But for now, just take home that not all is sweetness and light in the Garden of Eden. So, this etheric web protects us from a host of unwanted interference until we are ready to meet that challenge. The downside of possessing a web is that our objective consciousness is then limited to the physical world. The majority of stimuli from our physical and subtle bodies goes unnoticed because the consciousness of all our subtle bodies, including our subconscious, is not loud enough to be heard. Our physical brain only hears messages from our subtle bodies when these messages are shouted at us. It should be noted that the human monad focuses into the first triad in one of 3 places. These are the permanent atoms of the physical and the emotional bodies, 49.1 and 48.1, or the mental molecule, 47.4. It is aware of all the activity occurring in its 3 envelopes of incarnation, even if the physical brain is not. It is only when the conscious mind has total access to all the information being processed by its subtle bodies can it be in position to develop a coherent picture of reality. If you can imagine a series of semi-autonomous beings that go to make up our subtle envelopes, somehow your monad has to make its wishes known through them. In any situation, the monad has to decide how it wants to respond, and then make those wishes known to the brain. The technical difficulty for the monad to make its wishes known to the mental brain should not be underestimated. It has a series of envelopes that it functions through. We know these as the etheric, emotional, and mental envelopes. The physical body, however, is not part of the envelopes of incarnation of the monad itself. It is just a virtual reality suit that the monad puts on every time it wishes to incarnate into matter. If you thought your etheric web was spoiling your party, now you find that your main service unit is not actually part of you. So yet again, you have to find a way of communicating through indirect channels. The monad uses yet more subtle intermediaries. Before sensations, emotions, and thoughts are registered in the waking consciousness, the signals that are received from these bodies have to be boosted into the etheric brain till they are able to cross the threshold into waking consciousness. Even though the meta-consciousness is much faster than the brain, it has to go through the final link of the etheric brain to interact with the physical body. The problem is that meta-consciousness is very subtle. Our waking consciousness is anything but subtle. It is very loud. To get the brain to work as a physical unit, you need much stronger electrical and chemical signals to activate the chemical and biological processes in the brain. The brain itself is inefficient, insensitive, and slow. It is a dim shadow of the meta-consciousness. To put this into some perspective, the physical brain has a consciousness level about 1/1,000,000th of what your monad has. In the case of some individuals, a whole lot less than that. Our waking consciousness is part of our meta-consciousness. In this manner, it is able to direct the emotional and mental bodies to produce thoughts. These impulses generated in our physical brain go to form our thoughts and feelings. When the brain sends up signals to the mental plane, the monad, focused in the mental body, uses the 47-form mental molecule to interact with the physical etheric brain. This is the start of a thought form making its way into your consciousness. To this thought form is added the impulse of emotional motivation, which comes from that particular envelope. The 48-1 emotional atom supplies that energy. Finally, to get a thought to the brain to be used by the physical body, the monad uses the 49-1 permanent atom to vivify the etheric thought form. You can now see how complicated the process is. At each step, energy is lost and mistranslations can occur, especially where the emotional body is involved. Once the thought gets to the brain, it is like walking into a disco. The lights and music distract your brain before the thought form even gets a chance to register and drive home its command. It is any wonder that we find it so difficult to concentrate, and more importantly, hold that concentration in a single pointed focus. Those of us who can achieve much more in our daily lives than those that don't. Clearly, what we think is the whole of our consciousness is a fraction of the whole story. We think of consciousness as a thought in our brain, yet our brain is just a translating agent. It is at the end of a chain that starts for most of us in our lower mental bodies. These thoughts are not just thoughts for most people, but feelings as well. In fact, the impulse that we call a thought often starts with a feeling. This drives the mental thought. It should be the other way around. Even when it is, the thought has to wade its way through the emotional body before getting to its final destination in the physical etheric brain. When it finally gets there, it is likely to be missed altogether due to the other thought pollution that clutters up your mind. If this is not depressing enough, there are many thoughts, feelings, and impulses that are not generated by the waking consciousness at all. They originate from our subconscious patterns in our emotional and mental bodies. These are also presented to the waking consciousness by the etheric brain. This will be the subject of my next presentation. If you wish to read a translation of the presentation or leave comments, links to my website are in the description box below. Thank you.